It wasn't a fight, it wasn't a Bravo drama, it was real life unfolding before our eyes. Kandi Burruss, who has faced rivalries, betrayals, and business wars on television, was brought to tears by the one thing she never saw coming: her daughter Riley's revelation about being in a relationship. The moment was raw, unfiltered, and so dramatic that the internet hasn't stopped talking about it. The live stream began like any other. Fans of Real Housewives of Atlanta and longtime followers of Kandi Burruss knew her as someone who could juggle a million things at once. A successful businesswoman, a Grammy-winning songwriter, a reality TV star, and, most importantly, a proud mother. That afternoon, viewers logged on expecting another fun, light-hearted Q&A with Kandi and her daughter, Riley Burruss. The energy was casual, playful even, as fans dropped in comments, asking about Kandi's latest projects, Riley's college life in New York, and updates on the Burruss-Tucker family. Nobody, not even Kandi herself, could have predicted that this ordinary life would turn into one of the most emotional and talked-about moments of her career. At first, everything flowed smoothly. Kandi laughed, answering questions about her restaurants and her music. Riley, sitting calmly beside her mother, had the poised energy fans had come to expect from her: smart, collected, and just a little shy. The chat buzzed with hearts and emojis, with fans calling Riley so grown up and complimenting how much she resembled her mom. For Kandi, these were the kind of moments she cherished, getting to show her daughter off not as a storyline on Bravo, but as her real-life pride and joy. But as the live continued, a question popped up from the comments section that instantly shifted the atmosphere. "Riley, are you dating anyone?" It was the kind of light-hearted question that fans often threw in, expecting a laugh, maybe a coy smile, or even a deflection. Kandi's instinct was to chuckle and brush it off, perhaps move on to the next comment. But before she could intervene, Riley did something unexpected. She leaned forward, smiled softly, and said the words that would send the live stream spiraling into an unforgettable moment. "Yes, actually, I am in a relationship." The chat exploded. Hundreds of comments flew in at once, fans typing in all caps, sending shocked emojis, asking for details, demanding to know who the mystery person was. The internet loves a reveal, but no one seemed more stunned than Kandi herself. For a second, her face froze. The woman who had faced countless on-screen confrontations, who had stood toe-to-toe with Atlanta's fiercest housewives, suddenly looked vulnerable and unprepared. Her eyes widened, and she let out a nervous laugh, trying to process what she had just heard. "What? You're in a relationship?" Kandi asked, her voice cracking slightly. It wasn't anger, it wasn't disapproval, it was pure shock. And in that moment, viewers witnessed something raw, the unfiltered reaction of a mother realizing that her little girl had truly grown up. Riley, calm and composed, nodded. "Yeah, I didn't think it was a big deal." For Kandi, it was a very big deal. She blinked rapidly, her hands fumbling as she tried to read the live comments flooding the screen. Fans noticed her demeanor shift, the smile slipping, the tears welling up. "Oh my God, I didn't know this," she whispered, almost to herself. Her followers watched as the woman known for being tough and unshakable broke down live, tears rolling down her cheeks as she covered her face with her hands. Riley, slightly embarrassed but still composed, reached over and rubbed her mother's arm, whispering, "Mom, it's okay." The moment was explosive not because it was scandalous, but because it was so deeply human. It wasn't a Bravo-style drama scripted for ratings. It was a mother realizing that her daughter's childhood had truly ended. Kandi's tears weren't just about Riley having a boyfriend. They were about time passing, about the little girl she once carried on her hip now stepping into adulthood with her own private life. Fans watching at home could feel that weight, and social media immediately lit up with clips, reactions, and debates. For Kandi, though, nothing else mattered in that moment except her daughter sitting beside her. She pulled herself together, wiping her tears and trying to laugh it off, but her voice still trembled as she said, I didn't know. I wasn't ready to hear that live." The comments section went wild. Fans weren't just reacting to Riley's revelation, they were reacting to Kandi's tears. Some typed supportive messages, "It's okay Kandi, she's grown now." Others teased Riley with playful comments like, "Girl, who's the lucky one?" The chat scrolled so fast that neither mother nor daughter could keep up. But one thing was clear, the viewers had never seen Kandi like this before. She wasn't the business mogul or the strong Atlanta woman who never backed down. She was simply a mom, overwhelmed by a wave of emotions she hadn't expected to feel. Kandi tried to regain her composure. She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand, laughing nervously as she said, Y'all, don't mind me. I wasn't ready for this. Her voice cracked again, betraying how shaken she truly was. Riley gave her mother a small, reassuring smile. Mom, it's not a bad thing. I just didn't think it was something I needed to hide. To Riley, it was a simple part of growing up, something natural and normal. But for Kandi, it was as if the ground beneath her had shifted. Fans watching live began to connect the dots. They remembered the countless times on Real Housewives of Atlanta where Kandi had spoken about her struggles raising Riley as a single mother before marrying Todd Tucker. They remembered how protective she had been, how she always prioritized her daughter above the show's drama, above friendships, above business deals. Riley wasn't just Kandi's child. She was her anchor, her motivation, the reason she kept pushing forward no matter how tough life got. And now, seeing her baby girl talk about being in a relationship felt like a reminder that she was no longer that little girl who needed her in the same way. The live chat was filled with empathy. We get it, Kandi. This is every mom's moment. Another wrote, this is so real. We're literally watching a mother process her daughter growing up. That authenticity was what made the clip viral within hours. People clipped the moment, posted it on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Fans who didn't even follow Kandi tuned in just to witness what was being called the most emotional live of the year. Meanwhile, Kandi leaned back in her chair, trying to steady her breathing. You don't understand, she told Riley softly, her voice heavy with emotion. I've always seen you as my baby. And hearing you say this, it just hit me. Her tears weren't the tears of disapproval but of transition. A realization that Riley was stepping into her own world, making her own decisions, and that Kandi couldn't shield her from everything anymore. Riley, with a maturity that impressed viewers, responded gently, Mom, I'll always be your baby. But I'm also growing up. And I need you to trust me. That line struck a chord. Fans replayed it, quoted it, and praised Riley for her calmness and wisdom. It wasn't just a daughter revealing her relationship, it was a daughter showing her mother that she was ready to stand on her own. The screen felt electric, as if everyone watching was sitting in the room with them. The silence between Kandi and Riley, broken only by sniffles and laughter, carried more weight than any dramatic housewives argument. It was intimate, vulnerable, and painfully relatable. Mothers across the country saw themselves in Kandi, while daughters saw themselves in Riley. Kandi finally let out a long sigh, looking straight into the camera. Y'all, I know I'm acting extra right now, but this is real. This is me being a mama. And that line became the headline of countless fan posts. This is me being a mama. As the live continued, Kandi tried her best to laugh through her emotions, but the truth was written all over her face. Every smile came with watery eyes, every laugh carried a tremble in her voice. For someone who had always prided herself on staying strong, this was different. It wasn't about a business deal going wrong, it wasn't about cast drama or public scrutiny, it was about family. And for Kandi, family was sacred. What many people watching didn't realize was just how deep Kandi's emotions ran when it came to Riley. From the very beginning, Riley had been at the center of Kandi's world. Fans who had followed her journey on Real Housewives of Atlanta knew that Kandi raised Riley as a single mother for years before meeting Todd. They knew the struggles she faced, the nights she worked endlessly to build her career while making sure Riley never felt neglected. Every milestone in Riley's life, from school achievements to her move to New York for college, had been shared with pride and tears. To Kandi, Riley wasn't just her daughter, she was living proof of her strength, her sacrifices, and her resilience. So when Riley casually revealed she was in a relationship, it felt like a shift, a reminder that Riley was carving out her own identity outside of her mother's shadow. That's what hit Kandi so hard. The tears weren't about disapproval, they were about change. And change, especially when it came to her daughter, wasn't easy to process. Riley noticed her mother's struggle and leaned closer, almost as if she were trying to ground her. Mom, she said softly, you've done everything for me. You don't have to worry. I'm okay. The simplicity of those words carried a heavy truth. Riley wasn't a little girl anymore. She was a young woman who had grown up watching her mother's sacrifices and learning independence from her. She was strong because Kandi had taught her to be strong. She was responsible because Kandi had raised her with values. Now, Riley was simply asking for trust. Trust that she could navigate this new chapter of her life. Viewers in the comments section reacted with heart emojis and emotional messages. One fan wrote, "This is so pure. We're literally watching generational love in real time." Another said, "Kandi crying is every mom when their daughter tells them she's grown now." Mothers related to the pain of letting go, daughters related to Riley's need for independence. The moment bridged a universal experience, the bittersweet transition from childhood to adulthood. Kandi tried to explain her emotions during the live show. "It's not that I don't want you to be happy," she said through her tears. "It's just, I feel like time went by so fast. I was just braiding your hair for school, making sure you had everything you needed. And now you're talking about being in a relationship? I wasn't ready." Her voice cracked again, and she quickly reached for a tissue. Fans could feel the rawness of that statement. It wasn't scripted, it wasn't polished. It was the truth of a mother grappling with how quickly life moves. Riley, in her calm and thoughtful way, reassured her. "Time went by fast for me too, Mom. But I'll always be your daughter. That's never going to change. Having a relationship doesn't mean I love you less. It just means I'm growing, and I want you to be part of that." That sentence struck viewers deeply. It was mature, heartfelt, and showed just how much Riley valued her mother's role in her life. The live stream reached a climax as Kandi finally let go of her attempt to hide her emotions. She placed her head in her hands, shoulders shaking as tears rolled freely. Riley gently wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close in a rare public display of affection. The fans watching sent thousands of hearts across the screen, urging Kandi to breathe, telling Riley how amazing she was, and praising the raw honesty of the moment. Clips of the breakdown began circulating within minutes. The hashtags #KandiLive, #Riley Burruss, and #KandiCrying started trending. Memes were made, but alongside the humor came an outpouring of genuine love. Social media users praised Kandi for being vulnerable and showing that even celebrities with all their success feel the same emotions every parent does. Others applauded Riley for handling the moment with grace and maturity far beyond her years. For the next few minutes, the live stream softened. Kandi and Riley sat quietly, occasionally reading out comments, sometimes smiling, sometimes sighing. The energy had shifted completely. What started as a fun Q&A had turned into a heartfelt therapy session broadcast to thousands of viewers. The intimacy of the moment made it unforgettable. Fans didn't just see Kandi Burruss the celebrity, they saw Kandi Burruss the mother, raw, human, and beautifully imperfect. By the end of the live show, Kandi managed to smile genuinely again, though her eyes were still red from crying. "Y'all, thank you for letting me be real with you," she said, addressing the viewers. "Sometimes we don't realize how fast our babies grow up until it hits us in the face. And tonight it hit me." Riley laughed softly beside her, shaking her head. "You're dramatic, Mom," she teased, and that light-hearted banter helped ease the heaviness. Fans filled the comments with laughter emojis, grateful to see the bond between the two shining through even after such an emotional moment. The stream ended with Kandi hugging Riley tightly. "I love you more than anything," she whispered, her voice still trembling. Riley smiled and whispered back, "I know, Mom. I love you too." That simple exchange closed the live show with warmth, leaving fans teary-eyed and deeply moved. What happened that night wasn't just entertainment, it was a reminder of the complexities of love between parent and child. It was about growth, about letting go, and about embracing change even when it hurts. For Kandi Burruss, it was one of the rawest moments she had ever shared publicly. For Riley, it was a powerful step into independence while still honoring the bond with her mother. And for fans, it was proof that the most unforgettable stories aren't scripted. They're the ones that happen when the cameras are rolling and real life decides to break through. The live stream may have ended, but the emotions lingered long after the cameras were off. For Kandi Burruss, the breakdown she experienced wasn't just a moment of surprise. It was a mirror reflecting years of memories, sacrifices, and the heavy responsibility of raising Riley mostly on her own. When she shut her phone off that night, she sat in silence for a while, replaying Riley's words in her head. "Mom, I'll always be your baby, but I'm growing up." That simple sentence felt like both a comfort and a heartbreak. Comfort, because Riley acknowledged the depth of their bond, and heartbreak, because it confirmed what Kandi already knew. Time had moved faster than she could ever prepare for. For years, Kandi had worked tirelessly, balancing her career in music, her businesses, and her role on the Real Housewives of Atlanta with the unshakable duty of being a mother. She had been protective, sometimes overly so, making sure Riley never lacked anything. She remembered the nights she stayed up late after studio sessions just to make Riley's school lunches or help her with homework. She remembered the times she had to put on a brave face on camera, even when she was exhausted, because she knew Riley was watching. Every decision Kandi made was with her daughter in mind. And now, hearing Riley openly admit she was in a relationship stirred up all those motherly fears she had tried to keep buried. Fears of her daughter getting hurt, fears of her losing her innocence too quickly, and fears of not being able to protect her anymore. The internet exploded with reactions to the live stream. Fans dissected every detail, from Riley's calm tone to Kandi's tearful breakdown. Some praised Riley's maturity, noting how composed she remained even as her mother cried. Others empathized with Kandi, writing long posts about how hard it is for parents to accept their children growing up. On Twitter, one user wrote, "Kandi crying wasn't weakness, it was love. That was the realest moment I've seen in years." Another fan added, "Riley is such a beautiful soul. The way she comforted her mom showed just how well Kandi raised her." But for Kandi, none of the online chatter mattered as much as the quiet moments afterward. Later that evening, she sat with Riley in the living room, trying to put her emotions into words. "I just need you to understand," she told her daughter, "this isn't about me not wanting you to be happy. It's about me not being ready to let go." Riley nodded, listening with patience. She had grown up watching her mom juggle the pressures of fame and responsibility, and she understood that her mother's tears came from love, not control. "I know, Mom," Riley replied softly, "but you've given me everything I need to make good choices. I need you to trust that." That sentence hit Kandi deeply. It wasn't easy to trust the world with her daughter, but she knew Riley was right. The following days were filled with conversations, both private and public. Kandi opened up on her podcast, Speak On It, about the incident. She admitted she hadn't expected to cry, but the moment caught her off guard. "It wasn't about Riley being in a relationship," she explained. "It was about me realizing she's really grown now. I think every mom goes through that moment where you're just like, wow, my baby's not a baby anymore." The honesty resonated with her listeners, many of whom shared their own stories of breaking down when their kids hit milestones, whether it was going to prom, leaving for college, or simply introducing a first boyfriend or girlfriend. Meanwhile, Riley maintained her calm and mature outlook. In interviews and social media posts, she expressed love for her mom but also emphasized her need for independence. "My mom will always be my number one," she said in a Q&A, "but I'm also my own person. I want her to see that me being in a relationship doesn't mean she's losing me, it just means I'm growing." Fans admired her balance of respect and self-assurance. She didn't dismiss her mother's feelings, but she also didn't downplay her own growth. It was a delicate balance that many young adults struggle with, but Riley managed it with grace. The relationship itself became a subject of speculation online. Who was Riley dating? How serious was it? While she never revealed the name or details, her demeanor suggested she was happy and confident in her choice. Kandi, though still emotional, made it clear that her concern wasn't about who Riley was with, but about the reality of her daughter entering a new stage of life. For Kandi, every milestone Riley hit felt like both a victory and a loss. A victory, because it meant she had done her job well as a mother, raising a daughter who was ready for the world. A loss, because it meant stepping back and allowing Riley to make her own decisions, even if that meant making mistakes. The storyline resonated because it was deeply human. On reality television, audiences are used to dramatic fights, betrayals, and scandals. But this was different. This was real emotion, raw and unscripted. Fans weren't just entertained, they were moved. They saw themselves in Kandi's tears and Riley's calm reassurances. Mothers across the country admitted they cried watching it because they remembered the first time their child said they were in love. Daughters said they related to Riley's need for independence while still wanting their mother's support. The relatability of the moment is what made it so powerful. Behind the scenes, Kandi reflected on her own youth. She remembered being Riley's age and falling in love for the first time. She remembered the mistakes she made and how those experiences shaped her. As much as she wanted to shield Riley, she realized she couldn't rob her of those same lessons. Growth requires freedom, and freedom sometimes means heartbreak. That was the hardest pill for Kandi to swallow, that she couldn't protect Riley from everything. But in her heart, she also knew she had raised her daughter with enough wisdom and strength to navigate those challenges. The incident also brought Kandi and Riley closer in unexpected ways. Their late-night talks became longer, filled with laughter, tears, and honest conversations about life, love, and the future. Kandi began to see Riley not just as her daughter but as a young woman with her own perspective and wisdom. And Riley, in turn, gained a deeper appreciation for the love and sacrifices her mother had made. What started as a breakdown in life ended up opening a door for stronger communication and trust between them. For fans, the story became a symbol of growth, not just for Riley but for Kandi as well. Growth as a parent doesn't stop when your child becomes an adult. In many ways, it becomes even more challenging. Learning to step back, to trust, to let go just enough without losing the bond. That was Kandi's new chapter. And by sharing it publicly, she gave countless families a moment to reflect on their own journeys. After the storm of emotions on the live stream, the spotlight shifted subtly from Kandi's tears to Riley's calm maturity. For many fans, Riley had been a familiar presence for years, the shy little girl who grew up on television, blossoming into a poised young woman with her own ambitions. Now, for the first time, audiences were seeing Riley not just as Kandi's daughter, but as a person stepping fully into her own identity. And the way she handled the situation revealed so much about the kind of woman she had become. Riley's perspective on the incident was layered. On one hand, she deeply understood her mother's emotions. She had always known that she was the center of Kandi's world. Growing up, she had watched her mom hustle tirelessly, juggling multiple careers and public scrutiny while never letting Riley feel neglected. That type of love creates a bond that isn't easily broken. But at the same time, Riley also felt the weight of that bond, a pressure to remain her mother's little girl forever. And while she loved her mom for everything she had done, Riley knew it was time to assert her independence. When she revealed on live that she was in a relationship, Riley hadn't expected such a strong reaction. To her, it was a natural step in her growth. She was in her early 20s, living in New York, studying and exploring adulthood like any other young woman her age. To her, being in a relationship was normal, even overdue. But when she saw her mother break down, Riley realized that for Kandi, this wasn't just casual news, it was a milestone that carried heavy emotional weight. In her own quiet way, Riley tried to bridge that gap. "Mom, I'm still me," she had said during the live show, and those words carried the essence of her truth. She wasn't trying to rebel, nor was she pushing her mom away. She simply wanted her mother to see her as more than the little girl who once needed constant protection. Riley wanted recognition as an adult, someone capable of making her own choices, learning from her mistakes, and experiencing love on her own terms. What made Riley's perspective powerful was the maturity with which she expressed herself. Unlike many young adults who might have reacted defensively to a parent's emotional outburst, Riley remained patient and compassionate. She didn't dismiss her mother's feelings, nor did she make fun of them. Instead, she validated them while gently reminding Kandi that growth was inevitable. This approach showed not only her respect for her mother but also the depth of her own emotional intelligence. Behind the scenes, Riley reflected on her journey. She had grown up in the public eye, often criticized and sometimes misunderstood. She had dealt with online trolls commenting on her appearance, her personality, and even her relationship with her mom. Those experiences hardened her in some ways but also taught her resilience. By the time she went to college in New York, Riley had already developed a sense of independence. She was living away from home, making her own decisions, and carving out her path. For her, being in a relationship was just another part of that growth. Still, she knew her mom's tears came from love. That's why, instead of feeling angry or embarrassed, Riley felt empathy. She knew Kandi had worked harder than most parents, often sacrificing her own happiness to ensure Riley had everything she needed. That type of devotion comes with a cost, the fear of losing the child you've poured your entire soul into. Riley recognized that, and that's why she was so gentle in her responses. She wanted her mom to see her happiness not as a threat, but as proof that Kandi had done her job well. The dynamic between them became a talking point online. Fans admired Riley's composure, calling her wise beyond her years. Others pointed out how her calm demeanor balanced her mother's intensity, proving that their bond was strong enough to weather such emotional moments. The incident painted Riley as not just the daughter of a star but as a star in her own right, someone with her own voice, her own story, and her own identity. In private, Riley also wrestled with her own emotions. She knew being in a relationship came with risks. Love, especially young love, can be unpredictable. She had seen her mother's ups and downs in relationships, and she was fully aware of the possibility of heartbreak. But she also believed in experiencing life for herself. Riley didn't want to live in fear of mistakes. She wanted to embrace them as part of growing up. And she wanted her mom to trust that she could handle it. Her relationship, though private, was meaningful to her. It gave her companionship, support, and a sense of normalcy away from the glitz and drama of her family's fame. With her partner, she wasn't just Riley Burruss, daughter of Kandi. She was simply Riley, a young woman exploring her emotions, learning about love, and figuring out what she wanted for her future. That sense of individuality was precious to her, and she wanted to protect it, even if it meant gently pushing back against her mother's overprotectiveness. As the days went by, Riley and Kandi had more conversations. These weren't always easy talks. Sometimes they were filled with tears, sometimes with laughter, and sometimes with silence. But each conversation brought them closer to understanding one another. Kandi began to see that her daughter wasn't slipping away. She was simply evolving. And Riley began to understand just how deep her mother's fears ran, and why letting go was such a painful process. In many ways, the incident became a turning point for both of them. For Riley, it was about stepping out of the shadow of her mother's protection and owning her independence. For Kandi, it was about learning to let go and trust her daughter. The balance wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The beauty of Riley's perspective lay in its simplicity. She wasn't asking for permission to live her life. She was asking for understanding. She wasn't trying to break away from her mother. She was trying to bring her along on the journey in a new way. And that subtle difference made all the difference. In the end, Riley's quiet strength spoke louder than any dramatic gesture. She proved that maturity isn't just about age. It's about empathy, patience, and the ability to stand firm while still showing love. Through her actions, she reminded everyone watching that independence and family aren't opposites. They can coexist beautifully when both sides are willing to listen, learn, and love through the changes. In the weeks following that unforgettable live stream, something quietly shifted between Kandi and Riley. The breakdown that had initially seemed like a crack in their relationship slowly revealed itself as a doorway to a new chapter, one defined less by parental control and more by mutual respect, trust, and companionship. For years, their bond had been rooted in the roles of mother and daughter, Kandi, the fiercely protective provider, and Riley, the dependent child. But now, they were beginning to learn what it meant to meet in the middle, to share space not just as family but as friends. Kandi admitted to herself that the tears she shed on live weren't just about Riley's relationship. They were about her own fears of irrelevance. For 2 decades, Riley had been her why, the reason she pushed so hard in her career, the motivation behind her long nights and early mornings. Everything she built, from her restaurants to her music to her television presence, had been in service of providing Riley with a stable life. The thought of Riley no longer needing her in the same way shook her to her core. But as she sat with those feelings, Kandi began to realize that letting Riley grow didn't mean losing her. It meant gaining a new kind of relationship, one where love wasn't measured by dependence, but by choice. Riley, too, felt the shift. She had always loved her mom deeply, but the constant pressure of being the center of her world sometimes felt suffocating. That night on live had given her a chance to gently assert her independence while also reaffirming their bond. She wasn't walking away from her mom, she was simply redefining how they fit into each other's lives. And the more conversations they had, the more Riley began to see her mother not just as a protector, but as a woman with her own vulnerabilities, fears, and desires. That realization softened her perspective. She no longer felt like she was battling against her mother's protectiveness. Instead, she saw it as something they could navigate together. Their late-night talks became the cornerstone of this new chapter. One evening, as they sat on the couch with mugs of tea, Kandi confessed, "I think I've been so afraid of you growing up because I was scared of what that meant for me. Like, if you don't need me anymore, then who am I?" Riley, shocked by the vulnerability in her mother's voice, reached over and squeezed her hand. "Mom," she said firmly, "I will always need you. Just not in the same way. I need your advice, your love, your support. But I also need you to let me live my life. You're not losing me. You're gaining an adult version of me." That conversation marked a turning point. For perhaps the first time, Kandi began to truly believe that her daughter's independence didn't diminish their connection. It deepened it. As weeks turned into months, their relationship evolved into something beautifully balanced. Kandi stopped micromanaging Riley's decisions, and Riley, in turn, began voluntarily opening up more about her life. Instead of feeling interrogated, she now felt invited to share. The dynamic shifted from mother policing daughter to 2 women sharing their experiences. Kandi would tell Riley stories about her own youthful mistakes, the heartbreaks that shaped her, and the lessons she wished she had learned sooner. Riley listened, sometimes laughing, sometimes tearing up, but always appreciating the honesty. And in return, she shared her own fears and hopes, not because she was forced to, but because she wanted to. Publicly, fans noticed the difference as well. The next time Kandi and Riley appeared on live together, the energy was lighter. Kandi still had that protective edge. She couldn't help it, it was in her DNA, but there was a newfound ease in the way she interacted with her daughter. She teased Riley about college life, asked playful questions about her daily routines, and even cracked jokes about her own dramatic reaction the last time. Riley laughed along, rolling her eyes in that familiar daughterly way, but with affection rather than frustration. It was clear to viewers that something had shifted. The breakdown had turned into a breakthrough. What made this phase so special was how it mirrored the universal journey of mothers and daughters everywhere. The transition from childhood to adulthood is never easy, not for the child who craves freedom, nor for the parent who fears letting go. But Kandi and Riley were navigating it with honesty, vulnerability, and a willingness to grow together. Their story resonated deeply with fans because it was real, raw, and relatable. Mothers commented on social media about how they, too, had cried when their daughters started dating, and daughters shared how they longed for their mothers to see them as equals. The Burruss women had unintentionally sparked a larger conversation about family, growth, and the bittersweet beauty of change. Privately, Kandi began to appreciate Riley in new ways. She marveled at her daughter's maturity, her poise, and her ability to stay grounded despite growing up in the public eye. She started to lean on Riley in small but significant ways, asking for her opinion on business ideas, seeking her advice on fashion choices, and even talking to her about her own insecurities. Riley, in turn, embraced the shift. It felt empowering to be treated not just as a child, but as a trusted confidant. Their roles weren't reversed. Kandi was still the mother, the anchor, but they were more balanced now, more reciprocal. For Riley, this phase also meant learning to see her mother as more than just the unshakable provider she had always been. She began to notice the toll Kandi's career and responsibilities sometimes took on her. She saw the exhaustion behind her mother's eyes after long filming days, the way she sometimes doubted herself despite her success, and the vulnerability she often tried to hide. Recognizing these layers deepened Riley's empathy. She realized her mom wasn't just a superhero, she was a human being, one who had carried a lot on her shoulders for the sake of her child. That realization fostered a new kind of respect, one rooted not just in gratitude but in understanding. The more they embraced this new dynamic, the more they began to enjoy each other's company in ways that felt refreshing. They started planning mother-daughter trips not as chaperone and child, but as two women exploring the world together. They had long dinners filled with laughter, where conversations flowed freely from serious topics like relationships and careers to lighthearted debates about music, fashion, and pop culture. Their bond began to resemble friendship, not in a way that erased their roles, but in a way that added depth to them. Kandi herself often joked that Riley had become her therapist. Whenever she felt overwhelmed by the pressures of work, she would call Riley, who would listen patiently and offer advice with surprising wisdom. Sometimes, Riley would tease her, saying, "See, Mom? You raised me well. Now I get to take care of you too." Those moments filled Kandi with pride. For so long, she had been the strong one, the one carrying the weight. Now, seeing her daughter step into that supportive role, even in small ways, reassured her that she had succeeded. Of course, the journey wasn't without challenges. There were still moments when Kandi's protectiveness flared up, especially when it came to Riley's relationship. There were times she struggled to hold back questions or resisted the urge to intervene. But the difference now was that she and Riley could talk through those moments without conflict spiraling out of control. Riley had learned to assert her boundaries with kindness, and Kandi had learned to check her impulses with humility. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and that progress mattered more than perfection. Looking back, Kandi often reflected on that pivotal live stream. What had once felt like an embarrassing loss of composure had, in hindsight, been a necessary release. Without those tears, without that moment of raw vulnerability, the conversations that followed might never have happened. Sometimes, it takes breaking down to break through. And for Kandi and Riley, that breakdown had paved the way for a stronger, more authentic relationship than ever before. By the end of this chapter, mother and daughter were no longer just walking the familiar path of parent and child. They were walking side by side, navigating adulthood together, learning from each other, and leaning on each other. Their story wasn't about one letting go and the other breaking free. It was about finding a new rhythm, a new balance, a new way of being connected. It was about evolving together, not apart. And that evolution was the true heart of their bond. The journey that began with a tearful breakdown in life had now blossomed into a story of growth, resilience, and unshakable love. What could have been remembered only as a viral moment of vulnerability became the turning point that brought Kandi and Riley closer than ever before. In those few minutes of raw emotion, the world had witnessed a mother realizing that her daughter was no longer a child, and a daughter showing her mother that independence did not mean distance. It was a universal story wrapped in the lives of two women who just happened to live in the spotlight. Kandi often reflected on that night. She remembered how embarrassed she had felt, how unprepared she was for her emotions to spill over in front of thousands of people. But as time passed, she realized that there was nothing to be ashamed of. If anything, those tears made her more relatable, more human, and more real to the people who admired her. Fans didn't just see a celebrity in that moment. They saw themselves. They saw their own mothers, their own children, and their own struggles with the passage of time. That shared humanity was what turned a single livestream into something that resonated across generations. For Riley, the memory of that night also carried weight. She saw the vulnerability in her mother's eyes and realized just how deep Kandi's love ran. It wasn't about control or disapproval. It was about fear of change, fear of losing the closeness they had always shared. Knowing that softened Riley's heart. Instead of pulling away from her mom in frustration, she leaned in with compassion, determined to reassure her that their bond could withstand the changes ahead. Riley understood now that her mom's tears weren't weakness. They were proof of a love so strong it sometimes overflowed. Together, they used that night as a foundation to build something stronger. Their relationship transformed from one of hierarchy to one of partnership. Kandi still guided, advised, and protected, but now she also listened, learned, and leaned on her daughter when she needed to. Riley still respected and loved her mom, but she also asserted her independence with grace, proving that she could be both her mother's child and her own person. The balance wasn't always perfect, but it was authentic, and that authenticity was what made their bond unshakable. Fans continued to watch, not just because they were entertained by the drama, but because they were inspired by the love. Every new life, every public appearance, carried the subtle weight of that transformation. When Kandi looked at Riley now, she no longer saw just her baby girl. She saw a young woman she was proud of, a young woman she could trust to make her own decisions, a young woman she could lean on just as Riley leaned on her. And when Riley looked at Kandi, she didn't just see the strong provider or the protective mother. She saw a woman of strength, vulnerability, and heart, a woman she admired and aspired to emulate in her own way. The most powerful thing about their story was that it never pretended to be perfect. Kandi and Riley had disagreements, misunderstandings, and moments of tension like any family. But instead of hiding them, they faced them with honesty. That openness is what made people fall in love with their journey. It was raw, it was real, and it was beautifully imperfect. As time moved forward, the viral moment that started it all became less about tears and more about transformation. It was no longer just the night Kandi cried on live. It was the night a mother and daughter crossed into a new chapter together, hand in hand, stronger than ever. And in that truth, there was comfort for every mother watching her child grow up and for every child learning to stand on their own. In the end, the live stream wasn't just about Riley's relationship, it was about the evolution of a bond. It was about the unspoken truth that love sometimes hurts because it demands change, but it also heals because it adapts. For Kandi and Riley, love was never about holding on too tightly or letting go too quickly. It was about finding the balance in between, the sweet spot where both could breathe, grow, and still remain inseparably connected. Their story proved that no matter how many tears are shed, no matter how hard the transitions may be, the love between a mother and her daughter endures. It bends, it stretches, it sometimes breaks down, but it always finds a way to rebuild, stronger, deeper, and more beautiful than before. And that, perhaps, is why their journey touched so many hearts. Because at its core, it wasn't just Kandi and Riley's story. It was every family's story, told through the lens of two women brave enough to live it in front of the world.